Hey, everyone. Get ready, because I've got a super fun story for you today. It's snowy, it's silly, and it's got a big surprise that'll make you laugh and cheer. Imagine a cold day, a kid building a snowman, and a grumpy neighbor who thinks she's the boss of everything. But wait, there's more. Things are about to get wild, and the trouble sneaking up on someone who doesn't even see it coming. The title is HOA Karen calls 911 on my snowman didn't know the cops were already here for her. Cool, right? Before we jump in, I've got a fun question for you. Have you ever had a neighbor who just wouldn't leave you alone? Maybe they complained about your toys or your bike? Tell me in the comments below, and let me know where you're watching from today. Oh, and if you like awesome stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. I've got tons more to share. Okay, here we go. It all started on a chilly afternoon in December. The snow had been falling all night long, like a big white blanket covering everything. The trees looked fluffy, the houses looked cozy, and the yards were all soft and white. In a little neighborhood called Maple Street, there was a boy named Timmy Jackson. Timmy was just a regular kid, maybe like you or your friends. He had messy brown hair, a big smile, and a pair of mittens that were too big for his hands. That day, Timmy was super excited because the snow was perfect, not too wet, not too dry. It was just right for building something awesome. So, Timmy ran outside after lunch. He grabbed his coat, his scarf, and those big mittens his mom always made him wear. He didn't even wait for his boots to be tied all the way. He just zoomed out the door, leaving little footprints in the snow. His mom yelled after him, "Timmy, be careful," but he was already gone, laughing and jumping in the fluffy white stuff. Timmy had a plan. He wasn't just going to play in the snow. Nope. He was going to build the best snowman ever. Out in his front yard, Timmy got to work. He started with a little snowball, about the size of an apple. He rolled it around and around, and it got bigger and bigger. The snow stuck together like magic, and soon that little snowball was as big as a basketball. Timmy kept rolling it, huffing and puffing, his breath making little clouds in the cold air. He rolled it past the mailbox, around the tree, and even near the edge of the sidewalk. By the time he was done, that snowball was huge, almost as tall as Timmy himself. He patted it down with his mittens, making it nice and round. That was going to be the bottom of his snowman. Next, Timmy made another snowball. This one was smaller, about the size of a soccer ball. He rolled it the same way, giggling as it grew. He lifted it up, oof, it was heavy, and plopped it right on top of the big one. Perfect. Now his snowman had a body. But it still needed a head. So, Timmy made one more snowball, even smaller this time. He rolled it carefully, making sure it wasn't too big or too little. When it was just right, he picked it up and set it on top. There it was, a snowman with 3 parts, standing tall in the yard. Timmy stepped back and looked at it. It was awesome, but it needed more. He ran inside real quick, his boots tracking snow on the floor. "Timmy," his mom said, but he was too fast. He grabbed a carrot from the kitchen, a long orange one, and then he found an old scarf in the closet. It was red with little stripes, kind of worn out, but perfect for a snowman. He dashed back outside, almost slipping on the porch, and got to work decorating. First, he stuck the carrot right in the middle of the snowman's head. Bam, a nose. It looked funny and cute, poking out like that. Then, he wrapped the scarf around the snowman's neck, tying it in a little knot. The red scarf looked so cool against the white snow. Timmy grinned big. His snowman was starting to look alive. He needed a few more things, though. He ran to the garage and found some rocks, small, round ones. He stuck 2 on the snowman's face for eyes, and then he made a little smile with a few more. Now it really looked like a happy snowman, standing there in the yard, smiling at everyone. Timmy was so proud. He clapped his mittens together and jumped up and down. "Look at my snowman," he shouted, even though no one was around to hear him yet. Well, almost no one. See, Maple Street was a quiet place. The houses were all neat and tidy, with pretty lawns in the summer and snowy yards in the winter. Most people were nice. They waved at each other, shared cookies sometimes, and let kids play without too much fuss. But there was one person who wasn't so nice. One person who watched everything like a hawk. And that person was about to make Timmy's day a lot more interesting. Her name was Karen. Everyone called her HOA Karen because she was the boss of the neighborhood rules. HOA stands for Homeowners Association, which is like a club that makes sure everyone keeps their houses looking perfect. Karen loved those rules more than anything. She loved them so much, she'd walk around with a little notebook, writing down anything she didn't like. A bike left in a driveway? She'd write it down. A trash can out too long? She'd write it down. One time, she even told Mr. Henry his flowers were too bright and needed to be changed. Can you believe that? Too bright? Karen lived right across the street from Timmy. Her house was perfect, of course. The snow in her yard was all smooth, like she'd swept it with a broom. Her windows were so clean you could see your face in them. And her mailbox? It had fancy gold letters with her name on it. Karen thought she was the queen of Maple Street, and she made sure everyone knew it. If something wasn't just right, she'd complain. Loudly. And today, Timmy Snowman was about to catch her eye. Timmy didn't know it yet, but Karen was watching him. She was inside her house, peeking out from behind her curtains. Those curtains were white and lacy, and she moved them just a tiny bit so she could see. Her eyes narrowed as she watched Timmy stick that carrot in the snowman's face. She didn't like it. Not one bit. Why? Well, Karen had rules in her head about everything. And to her, that snowman was trouble. It was too close to the sidewalk, maybe 2 steps away. And in Karen's world, that was against the rules. She didn't care that it was cute or that Timmy was having fun. To her, it was a problem, and she was going to fix it. But here's the thing, Timmy wasn't just any kid. Sure, he looked like a regular boy with his messy hair and big mittens. Everyone thought he was just out there playing, making a snowman because it was a snowy day. That's what the neighbors saw when they peeked out their windows. That's what his mom thought when she watched him from the kitchen. Even Karen thought he was just a silly kid making a mess. But Timmy had a secret. A little something he wasn't telling anyone. And that secret was going to make this day way more exciting than anyone expected. See, earlier that morning, Timmy had been out in the snow before breakfast. He'd been looking for good snow to play with, walking up and down the street. And while he was walking, he saw something strange. Something sneaky. Something that made his eyes go wide. It happened over by Karen's house, but she didn't know he saw it. Nobody did. Timmy kept it to himself, tucked away like a treasure in his pocket. He didn't say a word, not to his mom, not to his friends, not to anyone. Instead, he went home, ate his cereal, and started planning his snowman. But that secret? It was still there, waiting. And it was about to change everything. What was the secret? Oh, I can't tell you yet. That would ruin the fun. But I'll give you a little hint, it had to do with Karen, and it wasn't good. Timmy saw something she didn't want anyone to know. And while he was building his snowman, he wasn't just playing. He was thinking. He was watching. He was waiting for the right moment. Karen thought she was the one in charge, but Timmy had a trick up his sleeve, or maybe in his mitten. The afternoon sun was starting to dip lower in the sky. It made the snow sparkle like tiny diamonds all over Maple Street. Timmy's snowman stood there, tall and proud, with its carrot nose and rock eyes. The red scarf fluttered a little in the breeze. It looked so happy, like it was saying, "Hey, world, look at me." Kids from other houses started to notice. A girl named Lily poked her head out her door and waved at Timmy. "Cool snowman," she yelled. Timmy waved back, his cheeks pink from the cold. Another boy, Jake, rode by on his sled and gave a thumbs up. "Nice job, Timmy," he called. Everyone liked it, everyone except you know who. Karen was still at her window, watching like a grumpy cat. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stared, her lips pressed tight together. To her, that snowman wasn't cool or cute. It was a big, snowy problem. She didn't like how close it was to the sidewalk. She didn't like how it made the street look messy. And she really didn't like that Timmy was having so much fun breaking her rules. Karen didn't care about fun. She cared about control. And right then, she decided she was going to do something about it. Timmy didn't see her yet. He was too busy fixing the snowman's scarf, making sure it looked just right. He stepped back again, tilting his head to check his work. Perfect, he said to himself. He clapped his mittens together, sending little bits of snow flying. He was so happy, he didn't even notice the curtains moving across the street. He didn't hear Karen muttering to herself inside her house. He didn't know she was about to storm out and try to ruin his day. But that's okay because Timmy was ready. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to turn the tables in a way nobody saw coming. Here's a quick question for you, what would you do if someone tried to stop you from having fun? Would you run away? Would you argue? Or would you do something sneaky and smart? Drop your answer in the comments, I want to know. And stick around, because someone's about to mess with Timmy and it's not going to go the way they think. This snowy day is about to get a lot crazier. It was a chilly afternoon in December, and little Timmy Jackson was just a regular kid in his quiet neighborhood. Snow had fallen all night long, covering everything like a big, soft white blanket. The yards looked fluffy, the trees looked pretty, and the whole street glowed under the snow. Timmy lived on Maple Street, a place where houses sat in neat rows and kids played outside when they could. That day, Timmy was super happy because the snow was just perfect. It wasn't too wet or too dry, it was awesome for building stuff. Timmy was a small kid with messy brown hair and a big, goofy grin. He had bright eyes that sparkled when he was excited, and today, they were sparkling big time. He pulled on his coat, a puffy blue one with a zipper that sometimes got stuck. He grabbed his mittens, two big red ones that flopped over his hands because they were a little too large. His mom tied his scarf around his neck, a green one with little stripes, and told him, "Stay warm, Timmy." He nodded fast, already halfway out the door, ready to play. Outside, the air was cold and crisp. Timmy's breath puffed out in little white clouds every time he laughed or talked. He stepped into the snow, and it crunched under his boots. Crunch, 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 it sounded so cool. He looked around his front yard and smiled even bigger. The snow was deep, almost up to his knees in some spots. It was white and clean, like a big playground just for him. Timmy knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wasn't going to just run around or throw snowballs. Nope. He was going to build a snowman, a big, goofy one that would make everyone smile. Timmy started with a tiny snowball. It was small, about the size of an orange, and he held it in his mittens. He bent down and rolled it across the yard. The snow stuck to it, and it got bigger and bigger. Roll, 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 it went past the little bush by the porch. Roll, 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 it went around the mailbox. Timmy giggled as it grew. Soon, that tiny snowball was as big as a pumpkin. He kept going, pushing it with both hands, his mittens getting all snowy and wet. His cheeks turned pink from the cold, but he didn't care. He was having too much fun. After a while, the snowball was huge, almost as tall as Timmy. He stopped rolling and patted it with his hands. He squished it down a little so it wouldn't tip over. This was going to be the bottom part of his snowman. It looked round and strong, sitting right there in the middle of the yard. Timmy stepped back and wiped his nose with his mitten. Perfect, he said to himself. But he wasn't done yet. A snowman needs more than just a bottom, right? So, Timmy made another snowball. This one was a little smaller. He rolled it the same way round and round, watching it grow. It got to be about the size of a basketball. He huffed and puffed as he picked it up. It was heavy, but Timmy was strong for a little kid. He carried it over and plopped it right on top of the big ball. Thump! It stuck there, and now his snowman had a body. Timmy clapped his mittens together, sending snow flying everywhere. He was so excited he almost fell over. Now, it needed a head. Timmy scooped up more snow and made a third snowball. This one was the smallest, about the size of a soccer ball. He rolled it carefully, making sure it was just right, not too big, not too little. When it was ready, he lifted it up high. His arms shook a little because it was cold and heavy, but he got it up there. He set it on top of the other two balls, and there it was, a snowman. 3 round parts stacked up, standing tall in the yard. Timmy bounced up and down. It was starting to look really good. But a snowman isn't a snowman without some fun stuff on it, right? Timmy ran back inside real quick. His boots left snowy tracks on the floor, and his mom said, "Timmy, slow down." But he was too fast. He went to the kitchen and grabbed a carrot, a long, orange one his mom was saving for dinner. "Sorry, Mom," he yelled as he ran off. Then he opened the closet and found an old scarf. It was blue with little yellow dots, kind of scratchy and old, but Timmy thought it was perfect. He zoomed back outside, the carrot in one hand and the scarf in the other. First, he stuck the carrot right into the snowman's head. Poke. It went in easy, and now the snowman had a funny orange nose sticking out. Timmy laughed because it looked so silly. Next, he took the scarf and wrapped it around the snowman's neck. He tied a little knot so it wouldn't fall off. The blue scarf with yellow dots looked so cool against the white snow. Timmy stepped back again and looked at his snowman. It was big and round, with a carrot nose and a scarf. He loved it. But he wasn't done yet. Timmy wanted his snowman to have a face. He ran to the side of the house where there were some rocks by the steps. He picked up a few small ones round and black, perfect for eyes. He stuck 2 of them on the snowman's head, right above the carrot nose. Now it had eyes. Then he grabbed a few more tiny rocks and made a little smile under the nose. It wasn't a big smile, just a little curved one, but it made the snowman look happy. Timmy stood there, hands on his hips, grinning ear to ear. His snowman was awesome. "Look at you," Timmy said to the snowman, like it could hear him. He patted its side with his mitten, leaving a little handprint in the snow. The sun was shining down, making the snow sparkle all around. The snowman stood there, tall and proud, right in the front yard. It was close to the sidewalk, maybe a couple of steps away, but Timmy didn't think about that. He just thought it looked perfect right where it was. He jumped up and down again, so happy he could hardly stand still. "Best snowman ever," he shouted. The neighborhood was quiet that afternoon. Maple Street wasn't a busy place. The houses were all lined up nice and neat, with snowy yards and pretty lights in the windows because Christmas was coming soon. Most people were inside, staying warm by their fireplaces or drinking hot cocoa. But a few kids saw Timmy's snowman from their windows. A girl named Mia peeked out and smiled. "Cool," she said to herself. A boy named Sam rode by on his bike, yes, even in the snow, and waved at Timmy. "Nice snowman," he called. Timmy waved back, feeling like a king. Everyone thought Timmy was just a regular kid having fun. His mom watched from the kitchen window and smiled. "That boy loves snow," she said, stirring her coffee. The neighbors who saw him thought, "Oh, look at little Timmy playing." Even the mailman, who drove by in his truck, gave Timmy a thumbs up. "Good job, kid," he said. Everyone liked the snowman. It was cute and funny, with its carrot nose and little rock smile. Everyone thought Timmy was just being a kid, doing what kids do on a snowy day. But here's the thing, they didn't know everything. Timmy had a secret. A little something nobody knew about. He wasn't just out there building a snowman for no reason. Sure, he loved making it, and he was having a blast rolling those snowballs. But there was more to it. Something he was keeping to himself, tucked away like a toy hidden in his pocket. Nobody could tell by looking at him. He just looked like a happy kid with snowy mittens and a big grin. But Timmy was smart. He saw something earlier that day, something big, and it was going to make this snowy afternoon way more exciting than anyone thought. What was it? Oh, I can't tell you yet. That's the fun part, you've got to wait and see. But I'll give you a tiny hint, it had to do with someone on Maple Street. Someone who wasn't as nice as they seemed. Someone who didn't like Timmy's snowman one bit. And that someone was about to make a big fuss. Timmy didn't know it yet, but his snowman was going to start some trouble. Not because it was bad, but because someone else was being sneaky. And Timmy? He was ready for it, even if he didn't say so. Let's go back to that afternoon. The snow was still fresh, and the air was cold. Timmy's snowman stood there, looking goofy and happy. The carrot nose stuck out just right, and the scarf fluttered a little when the wind blew. Timmy walked around it, checking every side. He fixed a spot where the snow was lumpy, patting it smooth with his hands. He added a few more rocks to the smile, making it a little bigger. He wanted it to be the best snowman Maple Street had ever seen. And it was big, round, and silly, just like he planned. The sun was starting to get lower in the sky. It turned the snow all golden and shiny, like it was glowing. Timmy's breath puffed out in bigger clouds now because it was getting colder. He rubbed his hands together, trying to warm up his fingers inside those wet mittens. He didn't want to go inside yet, though. He was too proud of his snowman. He stood next to it, looking up at its funny face. "You're my buddy," he said, laughing. He even gave it a little hug, getting snow all over his coat. Silly Timmy. Across the street, someone was watching. Not Mia or Sam or the mailman. Someone else. Someone with a frown instead of a smile. Her name was Karen, and she lived in the house right in front of Timmy's. Karen wasn't like the other neighbors. She didn't wave or say nice things. She didn't like snowmen or kids playing loud or anything fun. Karen liked rules. She liked everything to be perfect. Her house had no snow piles, no messy yards, just smooth, clean snow and a shiny mailbox. She watched Timmy through her window, her eyes squinting like she was mad. Karen saw the snowman, and she didn't think it was cute. She thought it was wrong. Too close to the sidewalk, she said to herself, tapping her finger on the window. That's not allowed. Karen had a book of rules. She called it her HOA book, and she thought Timmy's snowman was breaking one. She didn't care that it made people happy. She only cared that it wasn't where she wanted it. And Karen? When she didn't like something, she didn't just sit there. She did something about it. But Timmy didn't know she was watching. He was too busy fixing the scarf again, making sure it stayed tied. He hummed a little song, hopping around in the snow. He didn't see Karen's curtains move. He didn't hear her grumbling inside her house. He didn't know she was about to come out and try to ruin his fun. And that's where the real story starts. Because Timmy's secret, the one he was hiding, was about Karen. Something he saw. Something she didn't want anyone to know. And that snowman? It was going to bring it all out. Here's a fun question for you: what would you do if someone tried to ruin your fun for no reason? Would you hide? Would you yell? Or would you do something super smart? Stick around, because someone's about to mess with Timmy, and it's not going to end how they expect. This snowy day is going to get wild, and Timmy's little secret is going to make it the best story ever. The next hour was pure Karen chaos. Picture this: the snow was still all sparkly on Maple Street, and Timmy's big, goofy snowman stood proud in his yard. But across the street, Karen was losing her mind. She was mad, really mad about that snowman. She stood in her house, her arms crossed tight, staring out her window with a big frown. To her, that snowman wasn't cute or funny. It was a problem. It was too close to the sidewalk, and Karen hated anything that didn't follow her rules. Karen grabbed her phone fast, like it was a race. She punched in 911 with her shaky fingers. When someone answered, she didn't even say hi. She just started talking loud and fast. "Hello. Yes, this is an emergency," she yelled. "There's a kid in my neighborhood ruining everything. He built this ugly snowman right by the sidewalk, and it's a danger. It's ruining our property values. You need to come quick." She was huffing and puffing, breathing hard like she'd just run around the block. Her voice was so loud, you could almost hear it through her window. Outside, Timmy didn't care. He was still in his yard, standing by his snowman. He had his mittens on, all wet and snowy, and he was stacking a few more snowballs. Not big ones, just little ones, like he was playing a game. He rolled one in his hands, making it nice and round, then plopped it on the ground. Then he made another one and stacked it on top. He wasn't even looking at Karen's house. He acted like nothing was happening, just smiling and humming a little tune. But here's the thing: Timmy wasn't as calm as he looked. He was watching. Not with his eyes all wide, but sneaky-like, out of the corner of them. Karen kept yelling into her phone. "Yes, it's on Maple Street. Hurry up. This is about neighborhood safety. That snowman could fall over and hurt someone." She wasn't telling the truth, though. The snowman wasn't going to fall. It was strong and solid, with its carrot nose and scarf all nice and neat. But Karen didn't care about truth. She just wanted the snowman gone. She hung up the phone with a big huff and peeked out her window again. She saw Timmy stacking those little snowballs, and it made her even madder. "That kid thinks he's so smart," she muttered to herself. Well, not for long. Timmy heard her voice, just a little, through the cold air. He didn't turn around, though. He just kept stacking his snowballs, one on top of the other, like a tiny tower. He made 3, then 4, then 5. They wobbled a bit, but he steadied them with his mittens. He was good at building stuff, really good. The snow stuck together just right, and his little pile looked cute next to the big snowman. Timmy patted the top one and smiled. "There you go," he said quietly, like he was talking to the snowballs. But inside his head, he was thinking about something else. Something he saw earlier. Something sneaky. Back at Karen's house, she was pacing around. That means she was walking back and forth, like a cat waiting for food. Her slippers slapped the floor, slap, 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 and her arms were still crossed. She kept looking out the window, waiting for something to happen. "Where are they?" she grumbled. "I called the cops. They should be here by now." She tapped her foot and shook her head. Karen thought she was in charge of everything on Maple Street. She thought calling 911 would fix her problem fast. And she thought she'd won already. Then it happened. A cop car rolled up. It came down the street quick, its lights flashing red and blue. The tires crunched the snow, crunch, 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 as it slowed down and stopped right in front of Timmy's house. The lights bounced off the snow, making it look all colorful and bright. Karen saw it from her window, and a big smirk spread across her face. A smirk is like a mean little smile, and Karen's was huge. She clapped her hands together once, loud, and said, "Yes. Finally. They're here." She thought the cops were coming for Timmy's snowman. She thought she was about to win. Karen ran to her door and threw it open. Cold air rushed in, but she didn't care. She stepped onto her porch in her slippers, pointing across the street like she was the boss. "Over there," she shouted at the cops. "See? I told you. That snowman's a problem. It's right by the sidewalk. Get rid of it." She waved her arm big, pointing at Timmy's snowman like it was a bad guy in a movie. Her voice was loud and squeaky, echoing down the quiet street. She stood there, hands on her hips, waiting for the cops to listen to her. Timmy looked up when he heard her yelling. He was still by his snowman, holding one of his little snowballs. He didn't say anything. He didn't run or hide. He just watched. His big eyes followed Karen as she pointed and shouted. Then he looked at the cop car. 2 cops got out, one tall with a hat, and one shorter with a clipboard. Their boots crunched the snow too, and they shut the car doors, bam, bam. Timmy tilted his head a little, like he was curious. But he didn't move. He just leaned against his snowman, resting his arm on it like it was his buddy. Karen kept going. "Look at it," she yelled. "It's ugly. It's ruining everything. I told you it's a safety problem." She stomped her foot on her porch, and her slipper almost fell off. She was so sure the cops would march right over, kick the snowman down, and tell Timmy to go inside. She crossed her arms again and nodded, like she'd already decided how this was going to end. Her smirk got even bigger, stretching across her face. She thought she was so smart, calling 911 over a snowman. But here's where it gets good. The cops didn't do what Karen wanted. They didn't even look at the snowman, not once. The tall cop adjusted his hat, and the shorter one looked at his clipboard. They stepped out of the car, walked a few steps, and then, they turned the other way. Not toward Timmy. Not toward the snowman. They walked right past it, their boots crunching loud, and headed straight for Karen's house. Straight for her porch. Straight for her. Karen's smirk disappeared fast like someone wiped it off with a rag. Her mouth dropped open, and her eyes got big. "Wait, what?" she said, her voice all shaky now. She took a tiny step back, her slipper sliding on the snowy porch. "No, no, no. Over there," she shouted again, pointing at the snowman. "It's that thing. Not me." But the cops didn't stop. They kept coming, their faces serious, their boots making little clouds of snow with every step. They were looking right at Karen, not Timmy, not the snowman. Timmy saw it all. He leaned against his snowman, his mitten resting on its round side. He didn't say a word, but his eyes were bright. He watched the cops walk past him, past his little stack of snowballs, past the carrot nose and the scarf. He watched them go right up to Karen's porch. And here's the thing, Timmy didn't look surprised. Not one bit. He looked like he knew something. Like he was waiting for this. He didn't jump or cheer or run around. He just stood there, calm and quiet, his breath puffing out in the cold air. Karen was freaking out now. "What's going on?" she yelled. "I called you. I'm the one who needs help. That snowman's the problem." She pointed again, her arm shaking a little. But the cops didn't turn around. The tall one stepped onto her porch, and the shorter one stood right behind him, holding that clipboard tight. They were close now, so close Karen could see their faces. The tall cop looked at her and said, "Ma'am, can we talk to you for a minute?" His voice was calm but strong, like he wasn't asking, he was telling. Karen blinked fast. "Me," she squeaked. "Why me?" "It's that kid. It's his snowman." She turned and pointed at Timmy again, her finger wobbling. But the cops didn't even glance at Timmy. The shorter one flipped a page on his clipboard and said, "We got a call, ma'am. Not about a snowman. About something else." Karen's face went pale, like all the color fell right out of it. She looked like she might fall over, but she grabbed the porch railing instead. Timmy watched it all happen. He leaned a little harder on his snowman, like he was relaxing. His little tower of snowballs was still there, wobbling in the breeze. He picked up one more snowball and rolled it in his hands, nice and slow. He didn't say anything, but his eyes followed every move the cops made. He saw Karen's face change. He saw her start to sweat, even though it was freezing outside. And he smiled just a tiny bit, so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking close. See, Timmy wasn't just some kid building a snowman for fun. Everyone thought that's all he was, little Timmy with his mittens and his goofy grin. His mom thought he was just playing. The neighbors thought he was just being a kid. Even Karen thought he was just a troublemaker with a dumb snowman. But Timmy had a secret. He'd seen something earlier that day, something big, something sneaky. And he wasn't about to let it slide. Not one bit. What did he see? Oh, I can't tell you everything yet, that's the fun of it. But I'll give you a little hint. It happened that morning, before he built the snowman. Timmy was out in the snow, walking around, looking for good spots to play. And while he was walking, he saw Karen do something she shouldn't have. Something she thought nobody noticed. Something she thought she'd get away with. But Timmy saw it. His big, bright eyes caught every bit of it, and he didn't forget. Back then, he didn't yell or run to tell anyone. He didn't knock on doors or call his mom. Nope. He just went home, ate his breakfast cereal with extra milk and started planning. He decided to build his snowman, right there by the sidewalk, where Karen would see it. He knew she'd get mad. He knew she'd do something crazy, like call the cops. And he knew it would all come back to bite her. Timmy was quiet, but he was smart, way smarter than Karen thought. Now, here they were. The cops were on Karen's porch, and she was yelling again. "This is a mistake," she said. "I'm the one who called you. I'm the good guy here." She waved her hands around, looking all wild. Her slippers were soaked now, and her hair was sticking up from the wind. She looked like a mess, and the cops just stood there, watching her. The tall one said, "Ma'am, calm down. We need to ask you some questions." The shorter one nodded and wrote something on his clipboard. Timmy kept watching. He tossed his little snowball up in the air and caught it, like he was playing catch with himself. He didn't look scared or worried. He looked like he was having fun, quiet fun, sneaky fun. The snowman stood next to him, its carrot nose pointing at Karen's house like it was watching too. The scarf flapped a little, and the rock eyes seemed to sparkle in the flashing cop lights. It was almost like the snowman knew what was going on, too. Karen's voice got louder. "Questions? About what? This is ridiculous. That snowman's the problem. Do your job." She stomped her foot again, and this time her slipper flew off. It landed in the snow with a plop, and she didn't even pick it up. She was too busy yelling. But the cops didn't budge. The tall one took a step closer and said, "Ma'am, we're not here about a snowman. We're here about something else. Something serious." Karen stopped yelling for a second. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She just stared. Timmy tossed his snowball again, up, down, up, down. He leaned on his snowman like it was a big pillow. His cheeks were red from the cold, and his breath puffed out in little clouds. He didn't say a word, but his eyes were locked on Karen. He saw her freeze. He saw her face go from mad to scared. And he knew why. He knew what the cops were talking about, even if Karen didn't yet. That secret he saw. It was starting to come out, little by little, like snow melting in the sun. The neighbors started to notice now. Windows opened a crack, and faces peeked out. Mia, the girl down the street, stuck her head out and whispered to her brother, "What's happening?" Sam, the boy with the bike, stopped riding and watched from the corner. Even the mailman slowed his truck to look. Everyone saw the cop car, the flashing lights, and Karen yelling on her porch. They thought it was about the snowman at first. Silly Karen, mad about snow again. But then they saw the cops talking to her, not Timmy, and they got curious. Timmy didn't wave at them or call out. He just stayed by his snowman, rolling that little snowball in his hands. He looked calm, like he was waiting for a show to start. And in a way, he was. The cops were still on Karen's porch, and she was still arguing. "This is crazy," she shouted. "I didn't do anything. That kid's the one you should talk to." She pointed at Timmy again, but her hand was shaking now. The tall cop shook his head. "Ma'am, we'll get to that. But right now, we need you to come with us." Karen's eyes got huge. "Come with you? What? No." She backed up, bumping into her door. The shorter cop stepped forward and said, "We got a tip, ma'am. About something going on at this house. We need to check it out." Karen's face went even paler, like she was a ghost. She shook her head fast. "A tip? From who? That's a lie." But the cops didn't answer. They just stood there, waiting. Timmy smiled a tiny bit more. Not a big grin, just a little curve at the corner of his mouth. He knew who gave the tip. He knew because he did it. Yep, little Timmy, the kid with the snowman, had called the cops himself. Not when Karen did, but earlier, way earlier, before he even started building. He saw something bad, something Karen did, and he told someone about it. Quietly. Sneakily. And now, here they were. What did he see? Don't worry, you'll find out soon. But for now, just know it was big enough to get the cops to come fast. Big enough to make Karen sweat. Big enough to turn this snowy day into a wild adventure. Timmy wasn't just playing in the snow. He was setting a trap, and Karen walked right into it. She thought she was smart, calling 911 about a snowman. But Timmy? He was smarter. And he was just getting started. The snowy afternoon on Maple Street was about to get crazy. The cop car sat there, its red and blue lights flashing bright against the white snow. Timmy's big, goofy snowman stood in his yard, watching everything with its carrot nose and rock eyes. Across the street, Karen was on her porch, her slippers wet and her hair all messy from yelling. She thought she was in charge, pointing at Timmy's snowman and telling the cops to get rid of it. But things were about to flip upside down. The two cops, one tall with a hat and one shorter with a clipboard, walked up to Karen's door. They didn't look at the snowman. They didn't look at Timmy. They looked right at Karen. The tall cop raised his hand and knocked on her door, even though it was already open from when she ran out. Bang, bang, bang. The sound was loud and firm, echoing through the quiet street. "Ma'am, we need to talk," he said, his voice deep and serious. He held up his clipboard like it was something important. Karen's face changed fast. It went white like the snow all around her. Her eyes got big, and her mouth opened a little, like she couldn't believe what was happening. "What? Me?" she said, her voice all shaky and squeaky. She took a tiny step back, her slipper sliding on the snowy porch. "This is about that snowman, right?" she stammered, pointing at Timmy's yard again. She was sure the cops were there because of her 911 call. She thought they'd march over, kick the snowman down, and tell Timmy to stop breaking her rules. But the tall cop shook his head. "No, ma'am," he said, calm but strong. "We're not here about a snowman." He looked at the shorter cop, who nodded and flipped a page on his clipboard. Then the tall cop looked back at Karen and said, "We got a tip about some stolen packages. A lot of them. And they're all traced back to your address." His words hung in the air like a big, Heavy cloud. The shorter cop tapped his clipboard with his pen, like he was checking something important. Boom. There it was, the twist nobody saw coming. Karen's jaw dropped. Her eyes got even bigger, like they might pop out of her head. Stolen packages, she squeaked. What? No. That's crazy. She waved her hands around, shaking her head fast. I didn't steal anything. You've got the wrong house. Her voice was loud again, but it wasn't mad anymore, it was scared. She grabbed the porch railing with one hand, like she needed to hold on so she wouldn't fall over. Her slipper, the one that didn't fly off, was soaking wet now, and her toes looked cold. Across the street, Timmy was watching. He stood by his snowman, leaning against it like it was his best buddy. His mittens were snowy, and his cheeks were pink from the chilly air. He didn't say a word. He didn't jump or cheer. He just watched, his big, bright eyes locked on Karen and the cops. And here's the thing, Timmy wasn't surprised. Not one bit. He had a little smile, so tiny you'd miss it if you blinked. Why? Because he knew what was happening. He knew about the stolen packages. He saw them. See, little Timmy, the quiet kid with the snowman, wasn't just playing all day. Everyone thought he was just a regular boy, rolling snowballs and having fun. His mom thought so. The neighbors thought so. Even Karen thought he was just a silly kid making trouble with his snowman. But Timmy had a big secret. Earlier that week, way before the snowy afternoon, he'd spotted Karen doing something sneaky. Something bad. Something she didn't want anyone to know about. And it was all about those packages. It started a few days ago. Timmy liked walking around Maple Street in the mornings, especially when it snowed. He'd crunch through the snow, looking at the houses and the trees all covered in white. One morning, Tuesday, I think it was, he was out early, before breakfast. The street was quiet, and the sun was just coming up, making everything glow soft and pretty. Timmy was kicking little piles of snow, watching them puff up in the air, when he saw something weird over by Karen's house. Karen was outside, which was strange because she didn't usually come out early. She had her coat on, a big gray one, and she was moving fast. Timmy stopped kicking snow and hid behind a bush so she wouldn't see him. He peeked out, his eyes wide, and watched. Karen went to Mrs. Carter's porch. Mrs. Carter lived 2 houses down, and grabbed a box. It was a delivery package, the kind with tape and a label, sitting there waiting for Mrs. Carter to find it. Karen looked around quick, like she was checking for people, then tucked the box under her arm and hurried back to her house. She went inside fast, shutting the door quiet. Timmy blinked. That's not her box, he whispered to himself. He didn't know why Karen took it, but he knew it was wrong. Stealing is bad, right? He didn't run over and yell at her. He didn't tell Mrs. Carter. He just stood there behind the bush, thinking. Then he went home, ate his cereal, and kept it in his head. But that wasn't the only time. The next day, Wednesday, he saw her again. This time, it was Mr. Henry's porch. Another package, a small one, sitting by the door. Karen snuck over, grabbed it, and ran back home. Timmy saw that too, hiding by the mailbox this time. By Friday, Timmy had seen her take 3 packages. 3. One from Mrs. Carter, one from Mr. Henry, and one from the new family at the end of the street. Each time, Karen acted sneaky, looking around, moving fast, hiding the boxes under her coat. Timmy didn't know what she was doing with them, but he knew it wasn't good. Maybe she was keeping them. Maybe she was selling them. Maybe she just liked taking stuff that wasn't hers. Whatever it was, Timmy didn't like it. He didn't tell his mom or his friends. He kept it a secret, locked up tight in his little head. So, that snowy afternoon today, Timmy decided to do something. He didn't yell or tattle right away. Nope. He was smarter than that. He waited. He built his snowman, right by the sidewalk where Karen would see it. He knew she'd get mad. He knew she'd freak out and call someone, like the cops, because that's what Karen always did when she didn't like something. And he knew it would give him a chance to let her secret slip out. How? With a phone call of his own. See, while Karen was busy huffing and puffing about the snowman, Timmy had already acted. Earlier that day, after he finished the snowman's scarf but before Karen called 911, he snuck inside. His mom was in the kitchen, making soup, and didn't see him grab the phone. Timmy dialed the police quietly, so no one would hear. "Hi," he said in a small voice. "I saw something bad. My neighbor, Karen, on Maple Street, she's been taking packages that aren't hers. I saw her do it 3 times this week. Can you check?" The person on the phone asked a few questions, and Timmy told them what he saw, where, when, everything. Then he hung up and went back outside to his snowman, acting like nothing happened. That's why the cops were here now. Not because of Karen's call about the snowman. Because of Timmy's call about the packages. Turns out, the cops were already on their way before Karen even picked up her phone. They got Timmy's tip, checked it out, and found out he was right. Those stolen packages were traced back to Karen's address. Maybe someone else had complained too. Maybe they found proof. Whatever it was, they knew Karen was in trouble, and they came straight for her. Back on the porch, Karen was still freaking out. "Stolen packages? That's a lie," she shouted. "I didn't take anything." "Who said that?" She looked around wild, like she thought someone was hiding in the snow. The tall cop stayed calm. "Ma'am, we've got evidence," he said. "We need you to come with us and explain." He pointed at her door. "Can we look inside?" Karen shook her head fast. "No. You can't. This is my house." But the shorter cop stepped forward. "We have a reason to check, ma'am. Let's make this easy." Karen's face went from white to red. She was mad and scared all at once. "This is ridiculous," she yelled. "That kid did this. He's lying." She pointed at Timmy again, her arm shaking so much it looked like it might fall off. But the cops didn't turn around. They didn't even look at Timmy. They kept staring at Karen, their eyes serious and steady. Timmy watched from his yard. He leaned on his snowman, his mittens leaving little snowy marks on its side. The carrot nose stuck out proud, and the scarf flapped in the breeze. Timmy's little smile grew just a tiny bit bigger. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The cops were doing the talking now, and Karen was falling apart. Her big plan to get rid of the snowman had backfired big time. She thought she was smart, calling 911. But Timmy was smarter. He'd set her up, quiet and sneaky, and now she was caught. The neighbors were watching too. Windows were wide open now, and faces peeked out everywhere. Mrs. Carter stuck her head out and yelled, "Hey, I've been missing packages." Mr. Henry opened his door and nodded. "Me too. What's going on?" The new family down the street came out on their porch, holding their little dog, watching with big eyes. Everyone was whispering, pointing, wondering. They saw the cops at Karen's house, not Timmy's, and they started to figure it out. Something big was happening, something way bigger than a snowman. Karen heard the neighbors and spun around. "Shut up," she snapped at them. "This is a mistake. I didn't do anything." But her voice was shaky, and nobody listened. The tall cop put his hand on her arm, not hard, just firm. "Ma'am, let's go inside," he said. "We need to see what's in there." Karen pulled away. "No. You can't. I'll sue you," she shouted. But the shorter cop shook his head. "We've got permission, ma'am. Let's not make this harder." Timmy tilted his head, watching it all. His snowman stood tall next to him, its rock smile shining in the flashing lights. He patted it with his mitten, like he was saying, "Good job, buddy." He didn't need to yell or cheer. He didn't need to tell everyone what he did. The cops were handling it now, and Karen was in big, big trouble. That secret he saw, the packages, the sneaking, the stealing, was out. And it was all because of him, the quiet kid with the snowman. Karen kept arguing. "This is wrong. I'm the victim here." "That snowman," she stopped, her words getting all jumbled. The tall cop sighed. "Ma'am, stop talking about the snowman. This isn't about that." He nodded at the shorter cop, and they stepped closer to her door. Karen backed up, bumping into the wall. Her slipperless foot hit the snow, and she yelped. "You can't do this," she cried. But they could. And they did. Timmy's little trap had worked. He didn't just build a snowman, he built a plan. He knew Karen would get mad. He knew she'd call the cops. And he knew his own call would beat her to it. The twist was perfect. Karen thought she was winning, but she was losing, and Timmy made it happen. The cops weren't here for his snowman. They were here for her. And that was the big reveal. Little Timmy, the kid nobody thought twice about, had turned the whole day upside down. The snowy afternoon on Maple Street was buzzing now. The cop car's lights flashed red and blue, bouncing off the snow like a big show. Timmy's snowman stood tall in his yard, its carrot nose pointing up proud and its scarf flapping a little in the breeze. Across the street, Karen was in big trouble. The cops were on her porch, and she was yelling, trying to wiggle out of it. But they weren't listening, not one bit. Karen waved her hands like a wild bird. "This is a mistake," she shouted. "I didn't take those packages. You've got the wrong person." Her voice was loud and squeaky, bouncing down the quiet street. She pointed at Timmy again, her finger shaking. "It's that kid. He's lying. He set me up." Her hair was all messy now, sticking up from the wind, and her slippers were gone, one lost in the snow, the other who knows where. She looked like a mess, but she kept talking, trying to make the cops believe her. The tall cop, the one with the hat, shook his head. "Ma'am, stop," he said, his voice strong and calm. "We've got proof. We know what you did." He nodded at the shorter cop, who held up his clipboard. "We traced the packages," the shorter cop said. "They all lead here to your house." He tapped the clipboard with his pen, like it was a big book of secrets. Karen's eyes got wide, and her mouth snapped shut for a second. She didn't know what to say, but then she started again. "No. That's not true. Someone's making this up," she cried. But the cops weren't having it. They'd heard enough. The tall cop stepped closer to her door. "Ma'am, we need to look inside," he said. "Open the garage." Karen shook her head fast. "No way. You can't go in there," she yelled. She tried to block the door with her arms, like she could stop them. But the shorter cop pulled out a little paper from his pocket. "We've got permission," he said. "Step aside." Karen's face went white again, then red. She looked like she might scream, but instead, she just huffed and moved out of the way. The cops walked past her, their boots clomping loud on the porch. They went around to the side of Karen's house where the garage was. Timmy watched from his yard, still leaning on his snowman. His mittens were wet, and his cheeks were pink from the cold, but he didn't move. He wanted to see what happened next. The neighbors were watching too, heads poking out of windows, doors cracking open. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Henry, and even the new family down the street were all staring. Everyone wanted to know what the cops would find. The tall cop pushed a button by the garage door. It made a loud rumble, RRRRRR, and started to lift up. The door rolled higher and higher, and then wow! There they were. Packages. Lots of them. Big ones, small ones, square ones, flat ones, all stacked up in Karen's garage like a secret treasure pile. Some had ripped tape, some had labels with names that weren't Karen's. There was a box with Mrs. Carter written on it in big black letters. Another had Henry family on the side. And one had a little Santa sticker, like it was a Christmas gift for someone special. Karen's jaw dropped. "Those aren't mine," she shouted, running over to the garage. "Someone put them there. I didn't do it." But the cops didn't buy it. The shorter cop picked up a box and looked at the label. "This was reported stolen 3 days ago," he said. He set it down and grabbed another. "This one too, reported missing yesterday." The tall cop turned to Karen. "Ma'am, these are all from your neighbors. How'd they get here if you didn't take them?" His voice was serious, and his eyes stared right at her. Karen stammered. I don't know. Maybe the mailman messed up," she said. But the cops shook their heads. "The mailman doesn't stack packages in your garage," the shorter cop said. He pulled out another box, a big one, and set it on the ground. "This was delivered to the end of the street. How'd it end up here?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have an answer. She just stood there, her hands shaking, looking at all those boxes she'd swiped. Timmy's mom came out then. She'd been watching from the kitchen window, but now she stepped onto the porch. Her arms were crossed tight, and she shook her head slow, like she couldn't believe it. She wore a big sweater and boots, and her breath puffed out in the cold air. She looked across the street at Karen and said, You messed with the wrong kid, Karen. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was strong like she meant it. She glanced at Timmy and gave him a little nod, like she was proud. Then she leaned against the porch railing, watching the cops do their job. The neighbors started talking loud now. Mrs. Carter yelled from her window, "That's my package. I've been waiting for that all week." Mr. Henry stepped outside, his coat half on, and shouted, "Hey, that's mine too. My new slippers were in there." The new family's mom called out, "We've been missing stuff since we moved in." Everyone was pointing and waving, their voices mixing together like a big, noisy party. They'd been scratching their heads for days, wondering where their Christmas gifts and packages went. Now they knew Karen had them all along. The tall cop held up his hand to quiet everyone. "Folks, we'll get this sorted," he said. "We're taking these back to the station to check everything." He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you're coming with us." Karen's eyes got huge again. "What? No," she cried. "You can't take me. I didn't do anything wrong." She tried to step back, but the shorter cop moved fast. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs, shiny silver ones that clicked when he opened them. "Hands behind your back, ma'am," he said. Karen freaked out. "Handcuffs? No way. This is crazy," she shouted. She waved her arms again, but the tall cop grabbed one, and the shorter cop grabbed the other. Click, click, the handcuffs snapped shut around her wrists. She pulled at them, but they didn't budge. "Let me go," she yelled. "This is about HOA rules. That Snowman broke the rules." Even now, with all those stolen packages right there, she was still muttering about the Snowman. "It's too close to the sidewalk. It's a safety problem," she said, her voice all wild. The cops didn't listen. They'd heard enough about the Snowman. The tall cop shook his head again. "Ma'am, this isn't about a snowman," he said. "It's about stealing. Let's go." They started walking her toward the cop car, one on each side. Karen's feet dragged in the snow, leaving little lines behind her. She kept yelling, "You'll hear from my lawyer. This isn't fair." But the neighbors didn't care. They were done with her excuses. Timmy watched it all from his yard. He patted his snowman with his mitten, leaving a little snowy handprint on its side. The carrot nose stuck out, and the rock eyes seemed to sparkle in the flashing lights. Timmy waved at the neighbors nice and slow, like he was saying hi. And guess what? They waved back. Mrs. Carter clapped her hands and shouted, "Good job, Timmy." Mr. Henry gave him a big thumbs up. The new family's little dog barked, and their kid waved too. Everyone was smiling at Timmy now, clapping and cheering like he was a hero. The whole street saw it happen. Karen got hauled off, her voice still whining as the cops opened the car door. "This is a mistake. I'm the boss of the street," she said, but the door shut bam, and it was quiet. Well, almost quiet. The neighbors kept talking, their voices all excited. "Can you believe it?" Mrs. Carter said. "She had my package this whole time." Mr. Henry nodded. "And mine. I thought the mailman lost it." The new family's mom hugged her kid and said, "Finally, we'll get our stuff back." The cops put Karen in the back seat. She sat there, her hands behind her, glaring out the window. Her face was red and sweaty, even in the cold. The tall cop got in the front, and the shorter cop went back to the garage to grab some of the packages. They couldn't take them all right then, there were too many, but they piled a few in the trunk. Thump, 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 the boxes went in, and the trunk shut tight. Then the shorter cop got in the car too, and they started the engine. Vroom. The tires crunched the snow as they pulled away. Timmy waved again as the cop car drove off. "Bye, Karen," he said, so quiet nobody heard him. His voice was soft, but his smile was big now, not just a little one, but a real grin. He turned to his snowman and patted it again. "We did it," he whispered, like the snowman was his partner. The carrot nose was still perfect, the scarf still tied, and the rock smile looked happy. That snowman wasn't going anywhere. It stayed right where it was, by the sidewalk, just like Timmy wanted. The neighbors came out more now. Mrs. Carter walked over in her big coat, holding a mug of hot cocoa. "Timmy, you're amazing," she said. She handed him the mug, and he took it with both mittens. "Thanks," he said, his cheeks getting redder not from the cold, but because he was shy with all the attention. Mr. Henry came too, his slippers still missing because Karen had them. "You're a smart kid, Timmy," he said, patting his shoulder. The new family's kid ran up and said, "Your snowman's the best." Timmy just nodded and sipped his cocoa, steam puffing up around his face. Timmy's mom came down from the porch then. She walked across the yard, her boots crunching loud. She stood next to Timmy and looked at the snowman. "You knew, didn't you?" she said, her voice soft but proud. Timmy looked up at her and nodded. "Yep," he said. "I saw her taking stuff all week." His mom smiled big. "And you didn't tell me?" she asked, pretending to be mad. Timmy shrugged. "I wanted to fix it myself," he said. She laughed and hugged him tight, getting snow all over her sweater. "You're something else, kid," she said. The street was alive now. People were talking, laughing, pointing at Karen's house. The cop car was gone, taking her away, and the flashing lights faded down the road. But the excitement stayed. Everyone gathered around Timmy's yard, looking at the snowman like it was a hero too. "That snowman's famous now," Mrs. Carter said, and everyone laughed. "Yeah, it caught a thief," Mr. Henry added. The new family's dog barked again, wagging its tail like it agreed. Timmy stood there, holding his cocoa, his mittens dripping wet. He didn't say much, just smiled and waved when people talked to him. He didn't need to brag. He didn't need to tell everyone how he called the cops or how he tricked Karen. They all knew he did something big. The kid they thought was just playing around turned out to be the smartest one on Maple Street. He saw Karen stealing, made a plan, built his snowman, and let her fall right into his trap. And now, he was the hero. The snowman stayed where it was, no one dared touch it. Not after all this. Its carrot nose glowed orange in the setting sun, and its scarf fluttered like a flag. The little rock eyes looked out at the street, like it was guarding everyone. "That's Timmy's snowman," Mrs. Carter said to Mr. Henry. "It's staying right there." Mr. Henry nodded. "Yep. It's the best snowman I've ever seen." They all agreed no HOA rules could move it now. The sun was going down, painting the sky pink and orange. The snow sparkled all over Maple Street, and the air got colder. Timmy finished his cocoa and handed the mug back to Mrs. Carter. "Thanks," he said again, his voice quiet but happy. His mom put her arm around him. "Time to go inside, hero," she said. "You've had a big day." Timmy nodded and took one last look at his snowman. "See you tomorrow," he said to it, then turned and walked to the house, his boots crunching all the way. The neighbors stayed out a little longer, talking about Karen and the packages and Timmy's smart plan. "Who knew?" Mrs. Carter said, shaking her head. "Little Timmy, saving the day." Mr. Henry laughed. "Karen won't mess with him again." The new family's kid ran around, pretending to be a cop, and everyone smiled. Maple Street felt different now, happier, safer, all because of one kid and his snowman. Inside, Timmy kicked off his boots and peeled off his wet mittens. His mom made him a bowl of soup, and he sat at the table, warming up. Outside, the snowman stood guard, its shadow long in the fading light. Karen was gone, her garage empty of stolen stuff, and the neighbors had their hero. Justice was served big time. And Timmy? He just ate his soup, smiling to himself, knowing he'd done something awesome. So there you have it, friends, a snowman, a nosy neighbor, and a twist so big it made everyone's jaw drop. Can you believe it? A little pile of snow named Frosty ended up being the star of the show, while Karen, the loudest lady on the block, got caught in her own mess. It's funny how things turn out sometimes, isn't it? Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. And this story? It's more than just a fun tale about a snowy day. It's got a lesson, a big one that I think we can all learn something from. Stick with me, because I'm going to tell you why this matters, and I bet it'll make you think about your own life too. Let's start with Karen. She was loud, right? Always yelling, always pointing fingers, always acting like she was the boss of everything. She thought my snowman was a problem, but really, she was the one causing trouble. She made so much noise about little things like Frosty being too tall or too ugly that nobody stopped to look at what she was doing. She was sneaky, hiding her own secrets while she picked on everyone else. But here's the thing, people who shout the loudest? They're often trying to cover something up. It's like when a dog barks a lot to scare you away from its hiding spot. Karen barked and barked, but the truth still came out. The cops showed up, and boom, her game was over. Now, think about Frosty and me for a second. We were quiet. I didn't yell back at Karen. I didn't fight or make a big fuss. I just built my snowman, watched her flip out, and let things happen. Frosty didn't say a word either, he just stood there, carrot nose and all, looking silly but calm. And guess what? Being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes, it means you're strong in a different way. It means you don't need to scream to prove you're right. The truth has a funny way of showing up on its own, doesn't it? It's like the sun coming out after a cloudy day, you don't have to push it, it just happens. So here's a question for you, have you ever met someone like Karen? Maybe not someone who calls the cops on a snowman, but someone who's loud and bossy and tries to make everyone else feel small? I bet you have. Maybe it's a kid at school who always brags or tells you what to do. Or maybe it's a grown-up who thinks they're better than everyone else. People like that can make you mad, right? They can make you feel like you're not good enough. But this story shows us something cool, you don't have to fight them back with loud words or mean tricks. You can just keep being you, doing your thing, and let the truth figure it out. Because, trust me, it always does. Let's talk about that truth part for a minute. When the cops showed up at Karen's house, it wasn't because of my snowman. Nope. It was because of her, all the stuff she'd been doing wrong for a long time. She'd been mean to neighbors, made up rules, and even got into some sneaky money trouble. She thought she could hide it forever, but you can't hide from what's real. It's like trying to hold water in your hands, it slips out eventually. And when it slipped out for Karen, oh boy, did it make a splash. She went from yelling at me to getting hauled away in handcuffs. That's what happens when you build your life on lies or bullying. Sooner or later, it falls apart. But what about the quiet ones? People like me, or even you, who don't always make a big scene. We've got power too, not loud power, but a secret kind. It's the power of waiting, watching, and knowing things will work out. I didn't have to call the cops on Karen. I didn't have to tear her down or make her look bad. I just kept building my snowman, sipping my hot cocoa, and letting life do its thing. And Frosty? He didn't do anything but stand there, yet he still won in the end. That's pretty awesome if you ask me. It's like a superhero power nobody talks about, the power of staying cool and letting the bad guys trip over themselves. Now, I want you to think about something. Have you ever had a moment where someone got what they deserved? Maybe a bully at school finally got caught being mean, and the teacher sent them to the principal's office. Or maybe someone bragged about cheating on a test, and then they flunked anyway. Moments like that feel good, don't they? They're like little wins for the good guys. And this story with Karen and Frosty is one of those moments. She thought she could boss everyone around forever, but nope, the truth came knocking, and it brought handcuffs with it. It's a reminder that being mean doesn't pay off. Being yourself, though. That's where the real magic happens. Let's imagine something together. Picture a kid, maybe you, who's just minding their own business, drawing a picture or playing a game. Then someone comes along and says, "That's dumb," or "You're doing it wrong." It stinks to hear that, right? You might want to yell back or give up. But what if you didn't? What if you just kept drawing, kept playing, and let them yap all they wanted? Chances are, that loud kid would get bored and walk away. Or maybe they'd get in trouble for being rude. Either way, you'd still have your picture or your game and you'd feel good about it. That's what I did with Frosty. Karen yapped, but I kept going, and look who came out on top. Here's a little secret about life, it's not about being the loudest or the toughest. It's about being you, even when other people don't get it. Karen didn't get me. She thought I was just some guy with a dumb snowman, but I was happy. I was having fun. And in the end, that's what mattered. She was so busy being mad that she forgot how to enjoy a snowy day. Don't be like Karen, okay? Don't waste your time picking on people or trying to look big. Build your own snowman or whatever makes you smile and let the rest sort itself out. I've got another question for you now. What's something you love to do that makes you feel strong? Maybe it's kicking a soccer ball, reading a book, or helping a friend. Whatever it is, hold on to it. That's your Frosty, your little piece of awesome that nobody can take away. And if someone tries to knock it down, just smile and keep going. They might think they're winning, but they're not. The quiet ones, the ones who don't give up, they're the real winners. Every single time. Let's go back to that snowy day for a second. After Karen got taken away, the neighborhood felt different. It was quieter, sure, but also happier. People started coming outside, smiling at Frosty, even adding little things to him like a hat or some extra snow. It was like the whole street woke up and remembered how fun life can be when you're not fighting over silly stuff. And me? I sat by my window with a warm drink, watching the snow fall, feeling pretty good. I didn't need to yell or prove anything. I just needed to be me, and that was enough. So what's the big lesson here? It's simple: sometimes the people who make the most noise are the ones with the most to hide. They're scared, deep down, that someone will figure them out. And the quiet ones like me, or Frosty, or maybe you. We're just waiting for the truth to come out. We don't need to shout it from the rooftops. We don't need to point fingers or start fights. We just keep doing what we love, and life takes care of the rest. It's like a magic trick, slow at first, but then, wow, it's amazing. Think about your own life again. Have you ever felt like the quiet one? Maybe you're not the kid who's always talking in class or running the show. Maybe you're the one who listens, who watches, who waits. That's okay. No, it's more than okay, it's great. Because being quiet doesn't mean you're invisible. It means you're smart. It means you're patient. It means you've got a strength that the loud ones don't even understand. And when the time is right, just like with Frosty and me, you'll shine. Here's one more story to prove it. Last year, my little cousin Timmy was at a playground. He's a shy kid, doesn't talk much, just likes to swing and build sandcastles. This bigger kid came over and kicked his sandcastle flat, laughing like it was the funniest thing ever. Timmy didn't cry or yell. He just started building it again, one scoop at a time. The big kid got mad that Timmy wasn't upset, so he kicked it again. But then guess what? A teacher saw the whole thing. The big kid got sent to sit on the bench, and Timmy? He finished his sandcastle, and it was even better than before. Quiet little Timmy won, and he didn't say a word. That's what I mean. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to fight every battle with fists or words. Sometimes, you just keep going, and that's enough. Karen didn't get that. She thought yelling and bossing people around made her powerful, but it only made her weak. When the cops showed up, she had nothing left, no excuses, no tricks. Me and Frosty? We had our snowy day, and nobody could take that away. So, friends, what do you think? Have you ever had a moment where someone got what they deserved? Maybe a loudmouth finally tripped over their own big talk. Tell me about it in the comments, I'd love to hear your stories. And if you like this one, give it a thumbs up, okay? It's fun sharing these with you. Until next time, stay warm, be yourself, and watch out for those HOA Karens. They might be loud, but they don't always win. Oh, and one last thing, next time it snows, go build a snowman. Name him Frosty if you want. Let him stand there, quiet and proud, and see what happens. You might be surprised at the magic he brings. Life's funny like that, full of little twists and big wins, all waiting for the right moment to pop out. See you soon.